Ever wonder what people did for work before desk jobs and Zoom meetings? Can you imagine earning your living by collecting other people's pee? The Middle Ages were filled with occupations that would make today's career counselors scratch their heads in confusion. While knights and blacksmiths get all the glory in movies, it's the weird, gross, and downright dangerous jobs that really tell us how different life was back then. Number 13. Whipping boy. Have you ever taken punishment for someone else's mistakes? That was literally the job description for whipping boys in medieval times. These unfortunate kids were hired to take beatings, meant for young princes and nobles. Since medieval etiquette forbade tutors and instructors from physically disciplining royal children, whipping boys were selected from noble but less important families to receive punishments whenever the prince misbehaved or failed at lessons. The whipping boy would live alongside the prince, receiving the same education and sometimes even becoming friends. The logic was painfully simple. Princes would feel bad watching their companions suffer for their mistakes and would improve their behavior. Royal children were supposed to develop empathy by watching someone else get smacked around for their errors. Whipping boys weren't randomly selected unfortunates, though they were carefully chosen from good families, and some even leveraged their position into future opportunities. Edward VI of England's whipping boy, Barnaby Fitzpatrick, later became a close advisor and was granted lands and titles. Still, imagine your career path involving being beaten for someone else's spelling mistakes. Number 12. Gong farmer. Think your job is crappy. Medieval gong farmers literally dealt with everyone else's waste. Before modern plumbing, human waste collected in cesspits beneath city dwelling. Gong farmers, or gong firmers, had the distinguished task of digging out these pits and carting away the excrement, working mainly at night, called night soil men in some places. These hardy souls would descend into cesspits with shovels and buckets, removing human waste that had sometimes been accumulating for months or years. The stench was so unbearable that gong farmers often became nose-blind, their sense of smell permanently damaged by constant exposure to the foulest odors imaginable. Despite the obvious downsides, gong farming could be surprisingly lucrative. In Tudor England, gong farmers earned about 2 shillings per ton removed, several times what an average laborer might make. This high wage reflected both the unpleasantness and the danger. Many gong farmers died from falling into cesspits and drowning or suffocating from the toxic methane gases. Others developed diseases from constant contact with human waste. The profession was so essential yet so despised that some towns had laws requiring gong farmers to live apart from other citizens and only work after dark. Talk about a job that literally couldn't pass the smell test. Number 11. Rat catcher. Ever wondered who dealt with rodent infestations before modern pest control? Meet the medieval rat catcher, part exterminator, part public health official, and entirely creepy by today's standards. During times when the plague could wipe out half a city's population, rat catchers performed a critical service by controlling the rodent population that carried disease-bearing fleas. These professionals used a variety of methods to capture and kill rats, from trained dogs and ferrets to elaborate traps. Some rat catchers became famous for their unique approaches. The most successful ones developed secret recipes for poisons or baits that gave them an edge over competitors. But the most disturbing part of the job? Payment often depended on providing proof of kills, meaning rat catchers would walk around town with strings of rat tails or entire rat corpses to collect their fees. The profession was immortalized in the tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, which, while embellished over time, is based on a real rat catcher who may have lured away children after being cheated of his payment. Rat catchers typically wore distinctive clothing, sometimes adorned with rat tails or other grisly trophies of their work. The job required intimate knowledge of rat behavior and habitats, plus a strong stomach for handling decomposing rodents. Despite their crucial role in public health, rat catchers were often viewed with suspicion and kept at a social distance. Perhaps because they spent their days handling disease-carrying vermin, or perhaps because there's just something unsettling about someone who's really good at mass rodent slaughter. Have you ever considered how medieval people got soft, comfortable clothing? Before modern fabric treatments, there were fullers, also known by the less dignified title of urine collectors. Fullers played a crucial role in cloth production by cleaning and thickening freshly woven wool. The shocking part: their primary cleaning agent was human urine. Fullers would collect urine from public toilets or even door to door, storing it in enormous vats until it was needed. When fresh cloth arrived from weavers, fullers would soak it in the stale urine and then stomp on it repeatedly with their bare feet. The ammonia in urine helped break down natural oils in the wool and clean the fabric. This stomping process, called walking the cloth, could last for days, with fullers standing in vats of fermenting urine for hours. If that wasn't unpleasant enough after the urine treatment, fullers would beat the wet cloth with clubs or special hammers, sometimes using fuller's earth, a clay-like substance, to absorb additional grease. The combination of chemicals and stomping caused the wool fibers to felt together, creating a thicker, more water-resistant fabric. The profession was so important that many English surnames derived from it, Fuller, Walker, and Tucker, all refer to different aspects of this smelly trade. Fulling mills eventually mechanized parts of the process, but for centuries, if you enjoyed wearing clean, soft woolen clothes, you owed a debt of gratitude to someone who spent their days ankle-deep in urine. Number 9. Resurrectionist. Would you dig up dead bodies for money? In the 18th and 19th centuries, resurrectionists, or body snatchers, made their living by exhuming freshly buried corpses and selling them to medical schools for dissection. While this profession emerged late in the medieval period and flourished in the early modern era, its roots trace back to medieval practices and the changing relationship between medicine and the human body. Medical schools needed cadavers for anatomy lessons, but religious and cultural taboos severely limited legal access to bodies. Only executed criminals could officially be used for dissection, nowhere near enough for scientific purposes. Enter the resurrectionist, who worked under cover of darkness with specialized tools designed for quick, quiet grave robbery. The best body snatchers could extract a corpse without disturbing the grave's surface appearance, digging a small hole near the headstone and pulling the body out feet first. They targeted fresh graves, preferably no more than a few days old, as decomposed bodies had less scientific value. Families who could afford it hired guards or purchased metal morgue-safes to protect their loved ones' graves from these nocturnal visitors. The work was technically not theft in many places, since a dead body legally couldn't be owned. Taking one wasn't technically stealing. However, disturbing a grave was still criminal. If caught, resurrectionists faced fines, imprisonment, or mob justice from outraged communities. Despite these risks, the profession attracted those desperate enough to brave both legal consequences and superstitious dread. Medical science advanced on the backs of these grave robbers, whose midnight work provided the anatomical knowledge that forms the foundation of modern medicine. Would you have had the nerve to be a body snatcher, or would you have been busy purchasing a morgue safe for your deceased relatives? Number 8. Sin eater. Ever heard of someone eating your sins away? Sin eaters performed one of the Middle Ages' most spiritually dangerous jobs. When someone died suddenly, without confession or last rites, families worried about the deceased's soul being trapped in purgatory. Hire a sin eater to absorb the dead person's unconfessed sins. The ritual typically involved placing bread and salt, sometimes beer as well, on the chest of the recently deceased. The sin eater would consume these items while reciting prayers or incantations, symbolically taking the dead person's sins into their own body. For this service, they received a small payment, typically just a few coins, or sometimes just the food itself. The theological implications were troubling. Sin eaters were essentially damning their own souls by accumulating the sins of others. As a result, they became social outcasts, avoided by the same communities that relied on their services. Most sin eaters lived in isolation, called upon only when needed and otherwise shunned. The profession typically fell to the desperately poor, who accepted spiritual contamination as a trade-off for survival. The practice persisted in parts of Britain until the early 20th century, particularly in rural Wales and English border counties. Sin eaters occupied a strange position between religious official and social pariah, providing a service the church condemned yet communities deemed necessary. Imagine making your living by ritually consuming other people's sins, becoming progressively more spiritually polluted with each funeral, all for a meal and a few pence. Would you take on the sins of others to feed yourself, knowing you might be damning your immortal soul? Number 7. Leech collector. How far would you go to collect blood-sucking parasites? Leech collectors, or leech gatherers, supplied the medical leeches used in bloodletting, a common treatment for countless ailments throughout the Middle Ages and well into the 19th century. These hardy individuals would wade into ponds and marshes with bare legs, allowing leeches to attach themselves to their skin. Once their legs were covered with feeding leeches, they'd carefully remove them and place them in containers for sale to doctors and apothecaries. Some leech collectors used the legs of old horses as bait instead, but the most common method involved using their own bodies as living leech traps. The profession was extraordinarily dangerous. Leech collectors frequently suffered from excessive blood loss, infections from dirty water, and diseases transmitted by the leeches themselves. The constant exposure to wetlands also led to fungal infections and skin conditions. Nevertheless, during the height of medicinal leech use in the early 19th century, when European hospitals were using millions of leeches annually, leech collectors could earn decent money supplying the medical demand. The job eventually declined as medical bloodletting fell out of fashion, but while it lasted, it represented perhaps the only profession where success meant literally having your blood sucked out of you. Modern medicine still uses leeches for specific medical procedures, but thankfully, today's medical leeches are bred in laboratories rather than collected by wading into swamps. Number 6. Climbing boys. Chimney sweeps. Did you know some of the most dangerous work in medieval towns was performed by children? Long before child labor laws, climbing boys, and sometimes girls, as young as 4 years old, were sent up narrow, soot-filled chimneys to clean out the dangerous buildup of creosote and debris. Master chimney sweeps would purchase children from orphanages or poor families, essentially owning these young apprentices. The smaller the child, the more valuable they were professionally, as they could navigate the narrowest chimneys. To train new climbing boys, masters would often light straw beneath them to force them upward or stick pins into their feet if they hesitated. Burns, falls, and asphyxiation were common, but the most tragic outcome was often a slow death from chimney sweeps cancer, scrotal cancer, caused by the constant exposure to carcinogenic soot that became embedded in their skin. Many climbing boys became stuck in chimneys, particularly at sharp turns or narrowing points. Some died of suffocation before they could be extracted. Those who survived into adulthood typically suffered from stunted growth, respiratory diseases, and twisted spines and limbs from years of contorting their bodies through tight spaces. Despite several attempts at regulation, the practice continued well into the Victorian era. Charles Kingsley's novel, The Water Babies, eventually helped turn public opinion against the practice by highlighting the suffering of these children. Imagine being small enough to be forced up burning chimneys, knowing that each day might be your last, all while your body absorbed the toxins that would likely kill you before adulthood if the falls and fires didn't get you first. Number 5. Plague doctor. Would you dress like a bird to fight disease? Medieval plague doctors developed one of history's most recognizable and unsettling professional uniforms: a long black coat, gloves, boots, wide-brimmed hat, and most distinctively a beak-like mask filled with aromatic herbs and spices. This peculiar costume wasn't just theatrical. It represented the medical understanding of the time. The distinctive bird-like mask served as an early form of respiration. Doctors stuffed the beak with herbs, spices, dried flowers, and other strong-smelling substances like camphor or vinegar-soaked sponges. According to miasma theory, the belief that disease spread through bad air, these fragrances would protect the doctor from the corrupted air-carrying plague. The full-body leather or waxed canvas garments similarly aimed to create a barrier between the doctor and contaminated air. Plague doctors' duties extended beyond treating the sick. They kept records of deaths, performed autopsies, and advised officials on public health measures. Often they became witnesses for wills and testaments of the dying, as regular lawyers refused to approach plague victims. Most unsettling was their primary treatment method: lancing and draining plague buboes, the swollen lymph nodes characteristic of bubonic plague. This painful procedure rarely saved the patient, but exposed doctors to infectious bodily fluids. Many plague doctors were second-rate physicians or even non-physicians who took the dangerous job when established doctors fled infected cities. Some were charlatans, selling fake cures, while others were genuinely dedicated healers using the best knowledge available. Despite their iconic appearance, plague doctors were largely ineffective against the disease they fought. Their protective gear provided some incidental protection against flea bites, the actual disease vector, but their treatments rarely helped patients. Would you have donned the beaked mask to fight history's deadliest pandemic, knowing your chances of survival and success were minimal? Number 4. Pardoner. Ever been scammed by someone claiming to sell salvation? Medieval pardoners were licensed by the church to sell indulgences, certificates that supposedly reduced time in purgatory for sinners. While officially performing a legitimate religious function, many pardoners operated as spiritual con artists, preying on people's fear of damnation. The job involved traveling from town to town, displaying sacred relics, often fake, and delivering dramatic sermons about sin and salvation. After sufficiently terrifying their audience with vivid descriptions of hellfire, pardoners would offer indulgences for sale at prices scaled to different incomes. The wealthy might purchase elaborate parchment indulgences for substantial sums, while the poor could buy simpler versions for a few coins. Chaucer immortalized the corrupt pardoner in the Canterbury Tales, describing one who carried fake relics, pig bones instead of saints' remains, and a pillowcase he claimed was the Virgin Mary's veil. Many real pardoners engaged in similar deceptions, carrying collections of dubious items: feathers supposedly from angel wings, splinters allegedly from the cross of Jesus, or vials of saint's blood that was actually colored water or animal blood. The profession became so notorious for corruption that it contributed significantly to the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther's famous 95 Theses were largely a protest against the abuse of indulgences. While some pardoners operated honestly within church guidelines, the potential for exploitation was enormous. They literally sold pieces of paper that promised to reduce suffering after death, a product impossible to verify or return if unsatisfactory. How much would you pay to reduce your time in purgatory? And would you have recognized the difference between an authentic pardoner and a huckster with painted pig bones? Number 3, professional mourner. Would you cry for cash at a stranger's funeral? Professional mourners, also called mourologists or weepers, did exactly that, providing dramatic displays of grief for the deceased, regardless of whether they had ever met them in life. Hiring mourners demonstrated social status and ensured a proper show of respect for the departed. These theatrical grievers would wear specific mourning clothes, sometimes tear their hair, scratch their faces, wail loudly, and even recite memorized laments praising the deceased's virtues, whether they had possessed them or not. The more professional mourners a family hired, the more prestigious the funeral appeared. The practice originated in ancient times, but flourished throughout the Middle Ages across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Female mourners were most common, though male mourners existed in some cultures. In medieval Europe, professional mourners became so common that some towns and churches actually tried to regulate or ban them, concerned that excessive displays of artificial grief were unseemly or even sacrilegious. Professional mourners needed specific skills, the ability to cry on command, a strong voice for sustained wailing, and enough emotional control to appear genuinely devastated while remaining professionally detached. Some specialized in particular types of funerals. Those for children might require a different style of mourning than those for elderly people. While the concept might seem strange today, professional mourners still exist in some parts of the world, carrying on this ancient profession of performative grief. Could you convincingly sob for someone you'd never met just for a paycheck? Number 2, garderobe cleaner. Think, cleaning toilets is bad today. Medieval garderobe cleaners had it infinitely worse. Garderobes were medieval toilets, usually a stone or wooden seat with a hole that emptied into a cesspit, or directly outside the building through a chute. In castles, they were often built into the walls as small chambers, sometimes projecting out over a moat or body of water. When garderobes didn't empty into water, someone had to clean them out. Enter the garderobe cleaner. These unfortunate individuals would remove accumulated human waste, usually by climbing down into the cesspit and filling buckets that would be hauled up and carted away. In castles with multiple levels of garderobes stacked vertically, creating a continuous waste chute through multiple floors. Cleaners faced the particularly grim task of clearing blockages while dodging fresh deposits from above. The job carried extreme health risks. Many garderobe cleaners died from toxic gas exposure, methane and hydrogen sulfide, or suffocation in the enclosed space of cesspits. Disease was a constant companion, and the overwhelming stench meant these workers were social outcasts even after they'd washed off the visible filth. One bizarre aspect of this profession involved the occasional treasure hunt. Valuable items frequently fell into garderobes, either accidentally or when people used them to dispose of evidence. Garderobe cleaners sometimes discovered jewelry, coins, or other possessions that had slipped from pockets or hands. Some garderobe cleaners actually made more money from recovered items than from their cleaning fees. The next time you complain about bathroom cleaning duty, remember the medieval worker who had to shimmy down a narrow stone chute filled with centuries of human waste, hoping not to suffocate while searching for blockages by hand. Number 1. Could you kill people for a living? Medieval executioners performed society's most dreaded yet supposedly necessary function, implementing death sentences and corporal punishments ordered by the courts. Unlike modern executioners who might push a button or administer an injection, medieval executioners performed their duties up close and personal, using axes, swords, ropes, and various torture implements, despite the essential nature of their work. Executioners were social pariahs. They typically lived outside city walls, or in designated areas away from other citizens. Many towns had laws forbidding executioners from touching food in markets or drinking from public wells for fear of contamination. They often wore distinctive clothing so others could avoid them, and their children typically couldn't enter normal trades or marry outside the executioner family. The profession frequently became hereditary because executioners' children had few other career options. Beyond performing executions, these professionals also conducted judicial torture to extract confessions or information. They needed to be skilled at inflicting maximum pain without causing death prematurely. Some executioners became specialists in particular methods. Beheading with a sword required significant skill to ensure a clean single stroke, while others specialized in breaking on the wheel or other complex forms of execution. Perhaps most disturbing, executioners often had side businesses selling body parts of the executed. Human fat, blood, bones, and hair were believed to have medicinal properties, and executioners had exclusive access to this macabre merchandise. Executioners' homes sometimes doubled as dispensaries, where people purchased remedies made from the executed. Some executioners even developed reputations as healers, using their intimate knowledge of anatomy gained from their grim work. Despite their outcast status, executioners were well-paid professionals. The job required technical skill, anatomical knowledge, and psychological fortitude few possessed. Some became celebrities of sorts, with reputations for being either mercifully quick or deliberately prolonging suffering. Could you swing the axe, knowing your essential service to society would make you permanently untouchable? Would the good salary compensate for the isolation and nightmares that surely accompanied being the person everyone feared to meet? Ever wondered what kind of jobs will make people shudder 500 years from now? Which of our normal professions might seem barbaric or bizarre to future generations looking back at how we earned our daily bread?